Let's talk now about what is abnormal behavior. Abnormal behavior is doing things outside of the normal job description. In other words, the pastor is doing things that are just strange and odd. They're not subject to an explanation. So in other words, if a pastor is doing things and that is causing division in the church and is failing to explain why he's doing this could potentially be spiritual abuse. Now, it doesn't mean that the pastor has to get permission to do everything, but when it's so obvious to everyone that he's acting in a way that is not normally part of his job and it's just strange. For example, Jim Jones required people to sign membership cards. Okay, normal behavior. They had membership cards with their pictures on them. But at the same time, they are also required to sign resignation cards. In other words, a card that said that they completely exonerated any of his decisions and that they could not turn around and sue him. So, is that normal behavior? Shouldn't you question this kind of abnormal behavior?
This way they won't give you no trouble. If anybody's a Judas, most of you don't need to sign this at all. But some do, and so everybody's going to have to sign one. That's the only way you can do it. This resigns from the church whenever we get ready for you to resign. You've already resigned. See what I'm saying? And nobody can go out when we get ready to get our promised land or get something set up for safety. Somebody won't be able to say, well, I have so much in this place, I'm a member. You won't be able to do it.
Now you're going to notice that he does a few things here. One, he identifies those who don't agree with him as being Judas. So he's using scripture to call out or to identify those who disagree with his behavior. That the only way we could do this is his way. That's a kind of a telltale sign of spiritual abusers. There's one way. And another thing you may notice that he's doing this for you. It's to protect you, to protect the congregation. His heart is pure. He desires to protect you. So now let's listen to the actual written document that the people are being required to sign and ask yourself this question. Is his motives and his desire to protect the congregation?
Church. The other one says, I hereby resign my membership in People's Temple Christian Church. I'm resigning because my beliefs and activities are at variance with the beliefs and activities of People's Temple Christian Church and Jim Jones, the pastor of said church. I have no criticism of the church or the beliefs or standards of the People's Temple Christian Church. My only reason for resigning is that I do not feel that I can uphold these beliefs, and my current activities take up too much of my time. I have been treated fairly and with justice and love by Pastor Jim Jones and the members of People's Temple Church. At no time have I any reason to be unhappy and to disagree with any of the treatment that I have received. Signed.
Okay, now we have identified the abnormal behavior. What's the abnormal behavior? The fact is he's having people resign at the same time they're joining the church. What did you notice about the resignation letter? Who is it really protecting? Of course, it's protecting him, correct? And so we identify the abnormal behavior. And so what might somebody do? They might say, hey, this isn't right. This isn't correct. And so now when somebody does that, that person now becomes the enemy because they're questioning his leadership. And so he has to divide those people who question his leadership from those who are willing to spiritually submit to his leadership. And let's listen now.
You good folk won't mind going along with the bad folk, will you? Saying something over the tape recorder?
Now you might notice that in the background you hear a woman say, yeah. She is trying to align herself with who? The good folk. She wants to be thought as one of those church members who are good folk. How do you become a good folk? You submit yourselves theologically and spiritually to his leadership.
I said, you should not have to worry about anything because I have proven my character. What did I have to do for Chris Lewis? Nothing. He quit church. He wasn't coming to church. I never forget any child. They're halfway trying. I did make a requirement after that. If you quit church, we're not obligated to do anything. If you quit church, we're not obligated.
So we have identified the odd behavior. The odd behavior is that he's asking people to resign while at the same time signing membership cards. And if you want to be part of the good folk, and everybody does, you're going to accept his leadership unconditionally because you want to be part of the good folk. Now, why should you do that? Because he has proven himself to be a competent leader and to be righteous and to do the right thing. That's why you should accept it.
All night and all day and all night dealing with enemies. We are very glad to report that some of our enemies have decided to change their mind for whatever reason. They want to be back with us for whatever reason. And we're not so sure we're taking them, but they want to be back. Anyway, our enemies are in much disarray tonight because what they thought they had, they don't have, and they don't know which one of them are working for us. And if they did know, they would be surprised. And they don't know how our people are working, and if they did know, they would be surprised.
Okay, we're going to wind up this section about abnormal behavior by saying this, that the spiritual abuser has to participate in abnormal behavior in order to divide the fellowship. He needs to know who has the teachable spirit that he's looking for from those who are not going to accept his leadership unconditionally. They're going to question what he's doing. And so if he doesn't participate in abnormal behavior, he can't divide the congregation. And in the next few chapters, I'm going to share with you how he theologically changes the hearts and minds of the teachable congregation and how he deals with those people who are causing division or who are unequally yoked or who are he has labeled as the enemy, and how he deals with those. And then you'll better understand how he's able to gain control over the congregation and become a spiritual abuser. Now we're going to talk about those who have this teachable spirit. There are always those in the church who are not willing to really cause any kind of conflict. They just want to come to church and enjoy the sermon, and that's great, but their spirits have to be perverted. They have to be changed. Now, everyone wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so a lot of people want to belong to an organization. They want to be part of something bigger than what they are. And so they want to be involved in church. They have a desire to be part of something. They start out by first obeying Jesus. In other words, that's their motive. They want to obey God. They want to be a part of God's kingdom. But then the spiritual abuser perverts the scripture. He takes the scripture and twists it in order to change what? To change how they think. The scripture says one thing, but they pervert the scripture, change the thinking. And when the church member, the one with the permissible spirit, the spirit that is changeable, when that person begins to change his thinking, then he or she begins to accept the perversion of the scripture. And remember, it's all part of being part of something bigger than themselves. They accept the perversion, and then it leads to what? Obedience and a willingness to accept the leadership position of the pastor, and whatever that spiritual abuser decides to do, or however how he leads that individual, that person is willing to submit to that leadership. So we start out again. What? The person obeys Jesus. We have scriptural perversion, and it moves on to change thinking. That changed thinking begins to accept the perversion, and that perversion leads to total obedience of the leader. This happens again and again, over and Okay, now there are going to be those in the church who are willing to stand up for themselves and rebel. Now, the spiritual abuser cannot stand those who question his authority. They irk him to death. You are his enemy. He can't stand you, and his desire is to change you back into the obedient minion that he wants you to become. Now, how does he do that? Well, he's going to start a series of corrections in your life. He's going to change your behavior. All right, so now here's the first thing they want you to do, and you must not do this. They want you to talk to them and them alone in their office. And they twist the scriptures, and I believe me, I'm not going to go into that. They twist the scriptures to convince you that that is the biblical thing to do, and it is not. Do not go to the office by yourself with them. I want to tell you why, because I question if you are even equipped to do that. And I say that very humbly. And I mean this, that if you go to a modern battle, say if I'm a big guy, right? And if I go into a modern battle with a baseball bat, I am going to get slaughtered because they have guns and bombs and grenades. I can't I am not equipped, you see, to be able to go to battle with a baseball bat. So when you walk in that office, you are tremendously outgunned. First of all, it's their office, right? You're going to be intimidated because this is where he's comfortable. He's got his secretary out there, and you're alone, the door is closed, and there's no witnesses now. And so his word will always be above your word. So if he goes out publicly and says, well, I said this, and you say, I said this, and you said that, his word will always be over your word because people are going to trust him because he's the pastor. He has the bully pulpit. In other words, he can stand up on Sunday morning and he can say, I said this and I said this, and we are alone in my office, and I said this and this, and he would not believe me. And he can use that pulpit to publicly humiliate you. And most of the congregation are going to be against you. So, what I'm telling you, do not go into the office alone. Now, let me ask you another question. If somebody physically abused you, are you required by the scriptures to go to that person who did that? No, you go to the highest authority. You report to people what had happened. If somebody's spiritually abusing you, you need to report that to the authorities, if there are any kind of authorities. Most of the time, the churches that have this kind of pastor, any authority is working for the pastor. So you're going to have to decide after being abused whether you're going to stay there or not. I'll leave that up to you. But if you have something to say, if you challenge the pastor, do so publicly. Do it in front of people so that you have witness around you. In I think it's 2 Timothy chapter 5, it says that very same thing. Do it publicly. Don't do it alone.